Well, hello. Welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So, this week's blog is entitled Changes. And there's a number of reasons why I decided to write it. Obviously, we're going through a fairly substantial national change right now. There's also individual things that have happened here at Artemis that kind of inspired me to write this. Part of it has to do with just some of the individuals that come into Artemis and some of the questions that they've had. But basically, I wanted to explore the idea that everything is constantly in a state of flux. There is no such concept as static. Even orthodoxy is constantly subject to reevaluation, and by that, a definition of exponential growth. When we look at the way that we train with weapons, it's changed very dramatically, even though the weapon system has essentially stayed the same for the last 50 or 60 years. And in the case of the 1911, has changed very little over 100 years, okay? And yet, the way that we shoot that weapons platform has changed. Just look back at the way that we used to train in the 1950s or the 1960s, or as recent as the early part of the 2000s. We've learned more about the human body. We've learned more about the performance of the weapon system. And quite candidly, we've learned about the survivability in combat. And as a result of those things, we've modified our training to give us a higher degree of efficiency when we're using our firearm, as well as survivability if we're actually involved in combat. Now, this isn't relegated exclusively to weapons training, right? Obviously, as new weapons platforms come into being, we have to alter our methodology to be able to use those weapons platforms. When new things happen in our environment, we have to change, we have to adapt to be able to effectively deal with those things. And constantly trying to place things in little boxes becomes extraordinarily problematic. There's a story that I relate in the blog. It's about Norman Schwarzkopf, General Schwarzkopf. I won't go into it in this video blog, but at one point, very early on in his military career, when he was still a captain, he was put in a position where he learned something extraordinarily valuable from a general officer. Initially, he thought the general officer was effectively being lazy. In reality, the general officer was engaged in a conduct that was extraordinarily active, okay? And change not only requires the conceptual ability to change, but also the fundamental desire to change, okay? And one of the things that I also mentioned inside the blog that I think is important for everybody to realize is that everything is designed to change during a 90-day period of time, okay? My own personal philosophy is that, you adopt something, you try it, you explore it, you expand upon it during 90 days. At the end of those 90 days, it either worked or it didn't. And then it's time to move on. It's either something that becomes adopted as a permanent feature and also subject to potential change when something better comes along, or during that 90-day period of time, you realized it was complete garbage, and now it's time to abandon that and either go back to an original first principle or come up with something entirely different. A lot of philosophers throughout human history have expanded on this concept as well, from Hegelian dialectic through Nietzsche, even John Stuart Mill in our own country. The idea was that people are given new information, and as a result of that new information, it fundamentally alters their original preconceptions of things, or alternatively, it strengthens them. Sometimes the new information that's being provided to you is utter garbage. And if it is, then great. That actually enhances your original belief system, because now you see the strength, the underlying strength. It's been tested against something, and that something failed to overturn it. Anyways, I highly recommend that you read the blog this week. It's available on our website at artemishq.com. It'll go live on Wednesday. And as always, I want you to train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.